Hi guys, just a quick disclaimer before we start today's show. We talk about the worlds of wellness and mental health, but it's worth mentioning that this podcast should not be used in place of the support and care of an appropriately qualified health professional. On with the podcast.
Hello and welcome to A Spoonful of Theory. It's a monthly podcast looking at the facts, theories and stories from the world of wellness and mental health. So each month Ben and I are joined by a guest who's the same passion and interest in all things mental health related to present their fact from the past, present or future, and today's no exception. We're joined by Jane Fox, who is a clinical hypnotherapist, supervisor and lecturer based in Stockport and Wilmslow. But Jane has also worked as a clinical research associate in the pharmaceutical industry. So hello Jane.
Hi, nice to
Hi Jane.
be here.
Yeah, and as we've got a live guest, I thought it would be interested to let the live guest know, that's you Jane, by the way,
Okay.
to let you know who's been listening in today, who's going to be listening to the podcast, because we briefly talked about in a previous podcast that we were going international. I had a look at the podcast stats to see if that was true, and the countries that we've been listening to it in are obviously the UK, the United States, Mexico, China, Spain, Russia, South Korea, Norway.
Wow.
Yeah, and cities as far-flung as Blackburn, Beijing, which apparently I don't mention Beijing, I mention Blackburn every episode.
Yep.
Moscow, Pride, Louisiana, Bolton. There's lots of places on there.
So exotic.
So far flung.
Yeah, but also we can see, I can kind of get some of our colleagues listening in as well. A few down in Bristol, there's some in Stockport, that could be you.
Yes, it could be me.
There's lots of kind of different people around the country listening, so yeah, I thought it'd be interesting for you.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's good. We are international, literally, now at this point.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so should we go on with the first fact?
Sure, yeah.
And the first fact is Jenny's fact.
Yeah, it's my fact. So what I wanted to talk about today was the fact that there's positive placebo effects that you can gain just through your interactions with other people, and how unconscious bias, specifically based on race from the paper that I was reading, can interfere with who's getting the benefits of these effects and who isn't. I was reading about this in a paper from the Journal of Medical Ethics, and the paper is entitled Placebo Effects and Racial and Ethnic Health Disparities, an Unjust and Underexplored Connection. But basically what it was pointing out was that, I'd probably heard of the placebo effect a lot in terms of, being given a sugar pill or this kind of thing. But this paper goes on to explain that it's not just a sort of sham pill or treatment that you're given, but the actual way that you are given it, or the way that you interact with, in this case, physicians primarily. It talks particularly about people from who are black or Latino. I think a lot of these papers come from America. The way they're interacting, the physicians are interacting with these patients is different from how they're interacting with white patients. Inadvertently, they are dishing out quite freely and quite liberally to white patients things that have positive health impact that people from black and Latino backgrounds are not getting. Differences in health outcomes, people not responding as well to treatment or not adhering to treatment plans, or just being perceived as less healthy generally, and it might be because they're not getting the health boosting effects of these positive interactions in the same way.
Well, so this is a placebo effect when given a pill, that it works. It's a working pill. It's just there's also a placebo effect with that pill.
Well, yeah, and it's not just about the pills they give. We're looking at the sort of a direct benefit you can derive from various things, and they were looking at sort of demonstrated warmth, empathy, time spent listening versus time spent talking, which was interesting because looking at clinicians interacting with black patients, they engaged in 33% less patient-centred communication than when they were speaking to white patients, not parents, and were 23% more verbally dominant. So for whatever reason, these clinicians, they weren't giving their black patients as much time to speak as the white patients.
Right.
And other studies have shown that actually when the patient got that, and so we're talking in physical health here, not just mental health. You can understand that if you sat there as a talking therapist and did all the talking, it's probably not going to do much good for your patients. But this is talking about physical health, which I found really interesting. It also talked about thoughtful silences as having placebo effect. And I thought that's interesting, the idea of people feeling felt and feeling heard through just the way that the clinicians were, showing them respect.
A lot of this is what you call bedside manner then.
Yes.
And rapport. in our work we build rapport, don't we? And the mirror neurons as well that bring into our work to make our clients feel comfortable and listened to. And
yeah, and it makes sense. When I first got into hypnosis and reading around it, how you present hypnosis to an audience, how you present hypnotherapy to a client, even though they're very different things, very much sets it up for the rest of the session, sets it up for the rest of the theatre of it, and helps them to go deeper into hypnosis, or helps them to go engage more in sessions, back to rapport and things like that.
Well, that completely makes sense, because this paper in particular was talking about the two chief mechanisms that placebos work, and one is expectations and the other is conditioning.
Yeah.
The expectation thing I was something I'd kind of thought about in terms of, I quite like homeopathic treatments. And I know that some people just really do think they're sugar pills, and then I kind of think, well, maybe it's just because I think they're going to work, and I don't care. They work, so I'm happy.
Yeah, but it is one of those things as well. If you wear a lab coat when you're administering the placebo, there is an effect on it. If you hook somebody up to a machine when you're doing the placebo and it bleeps, you're getting more. If you wear glasses, like that helps in any doctor's surgery.
if you give a red tablet, it has a different effect from
than a blue tablet or a white tablet.
And if you give a capsule, it's more effective than a tablet.
So this is interesting, because this certainly plays to expectations, but the other part, conditioning, I wonder if there's a little bit of conditioning in that as well, because the good study on this was, right, I'm going to have to pronounce this word, they were giving people anise flavoured syrup, that I can all pronounce, I can do that, but they combined it with infusions of cyclophosphamide, which reduces white blood cells apparently. And after several pairings giving it in this way, they would give them just anise flavoured syrup, and that also reduced the white blood cells. And so that blew my mind. Wow. The body was really reacting like, oh, I know when I get this anise flavoured, when I get this flavour, I know what I do here. I reduce my white blood cells. Oh, I thought, wow, that's amazing.
I was involved in a study, quite a few years ago now. It was a placebo-controlled study with schizophrenics in the community. And the end point of the study was when those people who were suffering from schizophrenia relapsed, then the study would stop. But they were visited once a week by a community psychiatric nurse, and they didn't relapse. Even the ones on placebo didn't relapse, because they were having that one-to-one
contact.
Every week they were seeing somebody, and it was that kept them, even though they were on placebo, it was that contact that kept them well.
So it didn't matter what the drug was in that sense.
That is amazing. I find it really heartening. I think these things are really important, because my mother and my father were mental health nurses, so I've lived opposite some mental health hospitals that were of the old school. If things have changed now, and that's happened throughout my lifetime, but I remember seeing a lot of patients who these are the kind of patients that would live their life in these kind of institutions, and seeing the sort of physical effects on them. They were, and so the idea that you can do something like that just maybe it's that kind of positive interaction together, means that they don't have to take drugs. I mean, I don't know about the specific drugs that were in your trial, but I think that's wonderful. So I think it's really important to understand the placebo effect. But I feel that generally in the general populace, when you talk to people about placebos, you maybe get people a bit like me who are kind of going, I don't care if it's placebo, if it works, it's fine. And other people saying, being very dismissive, it's just a placebo effect. And you think, well, I mean, there's an example that the lowering of the blood cells, it's working like a drug would work. So how can you say it's not anything?
Well, I think the problem there comes from the same with hypnosis, really. We don't know specifically how it works. We can see it, and we can mark its effects, and we can see research effects, but we don't know why it works different in different people. We can't control it to the same as we could control something with a drug. If you give somebody this drug, something will change. But with placebo, if we give placebo, this exact thing will change. And maybe we can do that to more an extent, and maybe that's what needs kind of putting out there education-wise. But
well, I guess maybe with placebo, what changes is what you tell them will change.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the thing that's important about this paper is what it's citing is the fact that it's not just, this might be nice, or maybe we can enhance this, we give this pill and we can really enhance it by the way that we deliver this pill. It's making a point of we can't afford to ignore the fact that this does have benefit, because at the moment it might be quite unjust in that we're giving it freely, to some people, and other people are not accessing that because of clinician ideas of how intelligent people are. It even pains me to cite that, but that is what they found in the research about some people's ideas about the intelligence of their patients. So not taking on board the patient's ideas of how things will go, not speaking to them, maybe not being as warm as and empathetic, and not connecting with them so much. And so I think that was really quite a very interesting part. The sort of conclusion of this paper was, we can't afford to ignore it, because when we do that, we start to be unjust. So yeah.
That's a good conclusion to the fact as well.
You'd think I'd even maybe meant to do it that way.
So who's next? Is it me? Yeah, it is me. Okay, so my fact is, picking your nose and eating it is good for you.
Right. Thanks for this one, Ben.
It's alright, I got this fact by watching my wife. No, that's not true. Watching my son. Let's say that. And so, the Telegraph reported that scientists at a number of universities, including Harvard and Massachusetts Institute of Technology, say parents should not discourage their children or Jennies from picking their noses because they contain a reservoir rich in good bacteria.
A reservoir? Oh God, this is getting more and more disgusting.
But it's nature, and so another thing that they said is a professor called Dr. Scott Napper, from professor of biochemistry at the University of Saskatchewan in Canada, and he told, and this is all from the Telegraph, and I've seen it in a few different places, but the main kind of premise of this story is from the Telegraph. He says nature pushes us to do different things because it is to our advantage to have certain behaviours, to consume different types of foods.
This so sounds like he's been caught out, like on a date or something like that, and then he's just tried to make up some really like highfalutin science.
Wait, just say you should just This does strike me as like an argument between a couple.
I think you'll find, dear.
Yeah, but
he
finishes properties. That exactly. He finishes it with, "You should just go with nature."
It's natural. Everybody does it. Is that what he said?
Yeah, from an evolutionary perspective, we've evolved under very dirty conditions, and maybe this desire to keep our environment and our behaviours sterile isn't actually working to our advantage. And they talk about it being beneficial for your immune system, but also for your teeth.
Yeah, I read that, and I thought, what?
So apparently, it says this is actually a study on mucus. Basically, it forms a gel. Gel-forming components of mucus are called mucins or mucins, large glycoproteins that play a key role in defence. But basically they form this gel and kind of cover your teeth, essentially, and help you cope with sugars, sucrose.
Okay.
What if you rub the snot on your teeth?
It's in your mucus, it's in your saliva.
Oh, see, sorry. I thought, what is he doing with this?
This might be where it comes from with the, they suggest that you chew chewing gum. Some chewing gum companies say chew chewing gum after eating.
Yeah.
That might be where they get that from. But yeah, it forms, I think they call it a biofilm over your teeth that helps stop cavities, essentially.
Your saliva, but your saliva's already, I'm sorry, mister, but he's, no, that's still not picking your bogies and eating it. That's just saliva's in your mouth already.
If you do no, I can't show you how to do it, but... You
no, please.
We don't need a live demonstration like
I can give you a live demonstration. They're very closely linked, put it that way. So yeah, eating the dry remains of what you pull out is a great way of strengthening your body's immune system. Medically, it makes great sense and is perfectly a natural thing to do. And that's Austrian lung specialist Friedrich Bischinger. And he said that in The Independent. In terms of the immune system, the nose is a filter in which a great deal of bacteria are collected, and when the mixture arrives in the intestines, it works just like medicine.
Yeah, but exactly, it's in your nose because it's stopping it from getting into your body, and then you're just completely bypassing that by pulling it out of your lovely nose filter.
Your lovely nose filter, but the it's like a Dyson on my face. But
other vacuum cleaners are available.
Yeah, well, I'm not sponsored by any of them, so it's all right. But also, that's the title for the podcast. But yeah, no, you're right. And so there are different schools of thought, but these studies are, they're very dense studies looking at this, and they seem to have. We talk about microbiome quite a lot, don't we? I'd love to see them getting the
funding for that
well. We talk about the microbiome quite a lot. I mean, the Telegraph suggests you play in dirt and things like that. They go a little bit further, and there's there's a few different articles. Leukemia being linked to cleanliness in children as well. Have you heard of that? Yeah. So this is this is a study that says childhood leukemia is preventable and likely caused by keeping babies too clean, according to a landmark study, and that was in the Daily Mirror. So I've got this actually from the NHS, not the Daily Mirror, but this is somewhat of an oversimplification, is what the NHS says.
He protests too much.
That's it. Yeah. An initial. So basically, it's if they say the actual study says, rather than just babies are too clean, the study says it's a 3-stage process. So an initial genetic mutation that occurs when the child's still in the womb, reduced exposure to infection in the first few years of life, resulting in an immune system that's not fully developed, and that's where that bit comes from. And in those children with both of these events, a subsequent infection trigger or genetic changes that lead to, I think it's called ALL, acute
AL.
L. I'm going to find
Acute
out.
lymphoblastic leukemia.
Yes, acute lymphoblastic leukemia.
See, this is Jane just pulling us up several notches after you've taken us right. You're just trying to get us down into that muck so that our immune systems are supercharged.
So what the papers have done here is they've taken it and said you have to be clean, so you should be playing in dirt. This is back to that. You should be dirty. But actually, what they're saying is, and the author of is quoted on Cancer Research UK saying parents are in no way to blame for this. If their child has an accidental mutation in the room, that's not in the womb.
I mean, that was interesting because I did. That's exactly where my mind went. I was like, oh, that's quite a challenging one because it's a very difficult thing for your child to get that illness, and then for some. I mean, that's not to say that you shouldn't publish real research that shows them. Yeah. I'm glad they've said that because that would be quite challenging.
Well, so the reason that they're looking at this is to find what causes this mutation thing, so they can prevent it in the future. And the same with snot studies and things like that. Look, if you can get that bacteria in you to boost your immune system already, like how do we get that bacteria without having to pick our noses, or why are we telling children to stop picking their noses when it's good for them? But because it is a thing. Everybody does it.
Disgusting.
I'm not all about the aesthetics, Jane. Clearly.
Well, perhaps I am. Never mind the science.
I'm poo-pooing it.
Don't do that. That's a very different podcasting fact.
But I think that thing about letting children be a bit dirty. I mean, I'm going the route of the nose picking scientist here. You should see my kids sometimes. It's like, it's because it's very good for them that they're wearing that top. That's clearly
you do think so? Like we've got a toddler and we do clean his face regularly. When he's at home, we clean it really, really regularly. We're constantly wiping things off his face. But when he goes to nursery, less so. And when we pick him up, he's usually got something around his face. But actually, in the past we would have all had that. That wouldn't be, it's probably as you were an adult and you wiped it. But as children, you didn't wipe them as much. I remember my grandma saying kids used to have dirty fingernails. And now they never have dirty fingernails. Or my toddler didn't at the time. But
that might be to do with the fact that they don't play in the dirt as much.
Well, yeah. But
I think they should.
I
do think they should.
I think within reason. I think obviously you've got to be careful about that because there's things you can pick up in the garden and things like that as well. But I think it's interesting. It's an interesting debate around it. I mean, I was anti picking my nose and now I'm fully pro.
Yeah, you can start a campaign.
I've just started picking my nose, really. No campaigns. So if you see me and I'm picking my nose, just come and give me a high five.
No, I'm not going anywhere near your hand.
Wait till I've finished. Anybody want to add anything to that?
I did read in here about that there is a molecule called lugdunin produced by Staph lugdunensis, which resides in the nose, which is thought to be a new antibiotic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's potentially a good agent against methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, MRSA.
Oh, wow.
Which is a scourge on our hospitals.
Yeah, so there you go.
I mean, Staph aureus resides in the nose anyway, but 1 in 3 people are actually resistant to it.
So a cash-strapped NHS can be encouraging all of their patients to be picking their
only
nose.
the ones that are resistant, unfortunately.
So the ones that aren't should be picking the other people's nose.
Possibly.
Okay, so should we move on to Jane's fact?
Okay, well my fact is that certain plants spring flowering plants mainly contain antifreeze. This is
the stuff you buy on garage forecourts?
not exactly, no. The majority of plants store carbohydrate as sucrose or starch, but certain plants contain a polymer of fructose called fructan, and that fructan allows them to expand their cells in cold weather.
Wow.
And so when you see your snowdrops and daffodils and bluebells and things like that flower in the colder temperatures, it's down to this fructose polymer, mainly in the storage parts of the plant, the root or the rhizome or the bulb.
So it just keeps them alive, essentially, in frosts.
Yeah, that's right. It kind of works in 3 ways. Because this molecule, fructan, is highly soluble in water, it actually reduces the freezing point of the plant cells. It also protects their membranes because it doesn't crystallise on the cell membrane.
Oh, right.
And it's also synthesised at low temperatures. So what it means is that it gives these plants a flexibility of lifestyle that can exploit the seasons, and they have a highly flexible biochemistry.
That's really good, because it's not the survival of the fittest, it's the survival of the most adaptable.
Yeah. So it allows them to sort of exploit different habitats, seasons and life histories that would otherwise be open to just a restricted range of specialised species.
It's funny, I never even thought to think about why some flowers can, and they're very delicate looking, for example, snowdrops. Think that why they're out there when it is bitterly cold still in a British spring.
And I was reading into this, and actually freezing plants, they call it nucleate ice attack on plant cells, is actually something that some bacteria do on purpose to break down the plant. And I found this bacteria, Pseudomonas syringae, probably pronounced terribly badly, but they've equipped themselves with, they basically cause the cold. They create cold ice with proteins that create ice crystals at temperatures that normally don't freeze water. Okay.
Oh, so they're doing the opposite of what you were saying, Jen.
Yeah,
They kind of bring
the exact
it
opposite,
up.
yeah.
Protective.
So they're basically, the thought is, and it's still a hypothesis at this point, but that they're rearranging proteins. And the interesting thing is they can even do it when they're dead. So basically their system is set up to do it. So even when these bacteria are passed, when they're not alive, they can still do this. And the reason they know this is because they use it in artificial snow. It's one of the things they use to create artificial snow. Yeah. But actually these bacteria are everywhere. They're in the sky. They find them all over the world.
Are they in your nose, Ben?
They probably are in my nose, yeah. Who knows? No? They think that they may be what causes clouds and rain to form as well. So kind of grabbing onto it, and because it has to be cold. Clouds are formed by frost, essentially by freezing up in the atmosphere.
But I must say, I think I'm intrigued about, Jane, where does your fact come from?
My fact comes
Who's
from
your authoritative source here?
My fact comes from my MSc thesis from many moons ago.
You don't want to hear mine. Sounds completely. Mine was about Battlestar Galactica, so mine definitely isn't as clever as that one. But what interests me is not only that I didn't realise sucrose was in kind of plants, but also fructose. So that's fructose. I've come into contact with it from it's the F from FODMAP, isn't it?
It's not exactly.
It's not.
The F is fermentable.
Oh, I thought the F was fructose.
No, it's fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols are the FODMAPs.
And the FODMAPs, the things that people with irritable bowel syndrome should eat or shouldn't eat.
Well, it's a test, really.
Yeah,
it's a test.
Yeah, it depends. If you go on the FODMAP diet, it helps you to exclude things, and then you gradually reintroduce them to see what effect they have, so you can identify which food types you're intolerant to. But these carbohydrates are carbohydrates that aren't absorbed in the small intestine, so that passes into the large intestine and it gets fermented by bacteria, which is why you get bloating and wind. Bloating is a massive problem in irritable bowel syndrome. That fermentation can also cause diarrhea as well. So,
sorry, we got all the excretions.
yeah,
Today's
just
special.
about. Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah, literally. Have you got them? Have you got your card? House. So I think. So no, that's interesting. The kind of FODMAP diet as well, and it's not a diet that you could do for a long time, or you shouldn't do it for a long time because it's not massively healthy, is it?
No, it is simply to identify which
triggers.
I say simply; it's actually very it's quite complicated. But you can get apps that do it. Now, I think it's King's College in London have developed an app where you just put all the information in, and they gradually your symptoms and what you've eaten, the symptoms you've had, and then it will tell you what you shouldn't be eating to keep you well. Fantastic. So yeah.
And is that one of your specialisms?
Yeah, kind of, because I originally got interested in hypnotherapy because I was working for Professor Peter Warwell at Withington Hospital, who did a lot of the early research on hypnotherapy as a treatment for irritable bowel syndrome, and it was his work that actually got hypnotherapy approved by NICE.
It's one of the only actual.
It's the only thing that hypnotherapy is. Well, I say approved. I think they say it can be helpful.
Right.
With or some sort of.
I've read
like
the NICE guidelines. It's interesting because they say that after you've tried all the other what people might think of as more standard interventions for a year and not seen anything, then you can move to hypnotherapy, which I think is interesting because you're saying it's quite can be quite complicated, excluding these things and looking at effects and stuff like that. And also that's quite a lot of time when you've got this thing there that has no negative side effects, can have positive side effects. It's a shame that can't be moved up the ladder, but I mean, I'm sure they have their reasons for putting it in the way they do. They're clever people at NICE, of course.
Well, I mean, we talked about it last episode. We talked about social prescriptions.
Yeah.
And social prescriptions now are being given before antidepressants, or do you know what I mean? Talking therapies are being given before antidepressants now, rather than just kind of dishing out antidepressants. I think things are changing slightly, and attitudes are changing slightly. And obviously we're a bit biased.
Well, yeah, we might be slightly biased in this room about how good hypnotherapy is. It'd be worrying if we weren't.
But it's nice to also see that study and it being recognised for what it is, because there's plenty of evidence surrounding what we do, but to see it from somebody like NICE definitely gives a bit more credit where it's due.
I think the difference is that he was in a position where Professor Wall was in a position where he could gather data. Yeah. And that's what NICE, they want the data, and it's difficult to. Nobody's going to fund that. Yeah. If the pharmaceutical companies aren't funding it, it's very difficult.
Well, that is interesting around a lot of issues for complementary therapies. Is getting that it will seem as if people say there's not the evidence. Well, there is evidence, or there are studies, but they're maybe not big enough for a huge body like NICE or the NHS to say, well, that is definitive. We need something really pretty massive. But funnily enough, taking it back to bring it back to my fact, about placebos, and I was
well done, Jenny.
Yeah, well done me. Yeah. No, there was in reading around what I was reading, I read an interesting study they'd done about the placebo effect around IBS, because there was a study about very overtly giving people placebos and saying they had a nice way of describing it. In fact, let me just find that. They'd written, I think, on the box, they were labelled as placebo pills made of an inert substance like sugar pills that have been shown in clinical studies to produce significant improvement in IBS symptoms through mind-body self-healing processes. So that was what somebody got a pack of them, and other people, I think, didn't get anything. And the people who got the placebos had a significant improvement in IBS symptoms. I
think the placebo effect's amazing. Yeah. And I think it's probably something we could talk about all night.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. I think we're all in agreement. Has anybody got anything to add to fructose, freezing plants, or IBS? No? Oh, good then.
No.
Great.
So thanks to Jane for joining us today. Thank you,
It's
Jane.
my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks, Jane.
Yeah, and thanks to you all for listening. We hope you've enjoyed our facts and look forward to the next episode. You can follow Ben on Twitter at GMHip.
That's right.
Thank you. Jenny, that would be me, on jennynelson.co.uk. Had to think about that there. It's
Jenny with an I and one N.
one N, one I, yeah. And Jane.
She's got two eyes.
Thanks for confirming that. Well, we'll get to the end of this at some point. And Jane also on the internet at janefoxhypnotherapy.com.
And if you did enjoy the podcast or you have any comments for us, you can follow us on Instagram at A Spoonful of Theory, on Twitter at A Spoonful _, or by using the hashtag A Spoonful. You'll also get nice recipes. We've talked about that before. Don't forget to give us a review on iTunes too, because it puts us up the ratings and other people find us.
iTunes 2, is that better than iTunes 1? Sorry.
iTunes 2.0. And of course, you can get into contact with us via our website, aspoonful.co.uk, and it's got all the episodes on there. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next month. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.